Welcome to the TV Street Detective Channel. Here we update cases that shock the world. A notorious, savage, horrifying and tragic French criminal of Vietnamese origin. A veteran diplomat who witnessed the most shocking and haunting things in his working life. Between a ruthless, cunning villain, the unpredictable dangers in his escape journey across Asia, and the wisdom, perseverance, and relentless efforts of an ordinary person. Urged by justice as an individual, he fought to the end to find justice for the victims. A famous case jointly produced and streamed by Netflix and PPC called The Serpent. In addition, many books, movies, and TV series have been created based on the life and journey of committing crimes and escaping of this villain. Even though the villain had to pay the price before justice, the actual number of victims is still unclear. It can be said that until today, the journey to expose him to justice has not ended. Let's join Street Detective TV to dig deeper into this case. Charles Sobhraj, whose birth name is Hachan Paunani Gemukh Sobhraj, is the illegitimate child of a Vietnamese woman named Tran Lon Pong, a saleswoman, and an Indian businessman named Hachan Paunani Gurmukh, who is doing business in Saigon. As soon as he was born, Charles' biological father left. Lacking the warmth and love of his family, in Saigon, Charles grew up stateless and indifferent to his mother, because Mrs. Peng always thought that Charles was the cause of the rift and made that Indian man abandon her shortly after giving birth to Charles. With her beauty and relationships, Mrs. Peng met, got to know and married a French lieutenant named A. Phu Sedaro, who went to work in Indochina. Although the lieutenant adopted Charles, gave him French citizenship, and was willing to accept him and take him home, he refused to let Charles take his surname. Charles's mother's new marriage gave Mrs. Peng and Charles the opportunity to set foot in France when the Geneva Accords were signed and the French army withdrew. Charles's subsequent childhood years were spent in the port city of Marseille, France. At first, Charles's stepfather treated him very well and also pampered and loved Charles like his own son, partly because Charles was very intelligent, bright and obedient. Perhaps it was the influence of witnessing his family's breakdown and lack of affection early on. However, the joy and family affection that Charles experienced did not last long. When Mrs. Peng gave birth to the lieutenant's first biological child, named Andre, Charles was treated in a completely opposite way than before. Day by day, loneliness and alienation invaded Charles, especially when he almost no longer received attention from his family, and the promise of becoming an heir also went up in smoke. Since the lieutenant suffered a psychological trauma in the battle and had to be hospitalized for treatment of war syndrome, Charles was considered by his stepfather as someone who only wanted to exploit the family's already limited assets. In response to that indifference, like the thoughts of many children, Charles tried every way to attract attention, from deliberately acting stubborn and rebellious, to mischievous and destroying everything just to get his parents' attention. At home, Charles was a rebellious child, and at school, he was a problem student, often skipping class and intentionally causing trouble until he was kicked out by the teachers. It is strange that, although he was abandoned by his biological father since birth, Charles always had a strong belief that his biological father was a heroic figure in France. Throughout his growing up, Charles lived with the feeling of non-existence in a house with both his father and mother. The more lost he was, the stronger his desire to go to the east to find his biological father became. As he grew up, Charles became more and more determined to find his father. To fulfill this wish and satisfy his growing boredom and indifference, Charles began to take steps on the path of crime. At first, he often sneaked onto ships and tried to go to Indochina to see his father. But Charles's illegal trips were always discovered and chased off. As time went on, Charles became more and more rebellious and uncontrollable. Although living with the city's gangsters, Charles Sobhraj gradually fell into depravity, participating in and committing petty crimes, but was often caught by the police. Every time like that, Mrs. Peng and Lieutenant Afote had to lose face, spend effort and money to go bail Sobhraj out. During this time, Outside of school hours at the lycée, Charles continued to wander around the streets of Paris with a bunch of thugs, stealing to earn money for fun. Thanks to that, besides French and a little Vietnamese, Charles could communicate fluently. But everything has its limits. It is not clear whether Charles knew this at the time or not, until one day his stepfather and biological mother no longer wanted to bail him out, and then Charles was arrested for theft in Paris and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Since being imprisoned, Charles has been officially shunned by his family, lonely, humiliated, and helpless. With no one to care about his life or death, Charles increasingly harbored the ambition to force his own family and society to pay the price for abandoning a person. Charles even thought and declared that his life was a protest against the French legal system. His life, full of compassion, brought Charles to the notorious Paris prison in the province of Évry, the administrative region. This was also the prison that held Jakob Marvelig-Rutnik, an American spy, before being expelled from France and returning to the Soviet Union. Life behind bars at that time, especially in Évry prison, was even more cruel and vicious. A young Asian boy like Charles could have been a tasty morsel for gangsters, but with his knowledge and proficiency in karate, Charles quickly got used to this world. Even more special, thanks to knowing many foreign languages, Charles was occasionally called by the warden to work as an interpreter. Sympathizing with the plight of Charles, a bright-faced, intelligent boy who had been caught up in the law early and had an interesting personality, a philanthropist and volunteer named Felix Acogny took a closer interest in Charles. Mr. Felix was a wealthy man who often visited every prison to visit and talk to prisoners every week, then helped deliver letters, documents and communications, as well as solve simple legal problems. From there, gradually, Charles and Mr. Felix met, got to know each other, and became friends. Good-natured and devoted to volunteer work, Mr. Felix patiently listened to Charles talk for hours. Then he decided to help Charles reconcile with Mrs. Peng and her husband, but the result of the reconciliation was not very successful. In prison, lacking culture, it was Mr. Felix who brought books for Charles to read, taught many things, helped Charles expand his knowledge, brought encouragement, and was a spiritual support. Thanks to Mr. Felix, Charles learned a lot, mainly life skills and how to behave in communication. It was Mr. Felix's style that made Charles completely give up the habit of swearing, which was a habit he had picked up early on during his days wandering the streets. The time to finish his prison term in Évry finally came. After being released from prison, Charles moved in with Mr. Felix, and he also treated Charles as a son, like a grandchild in the house. From being a homeless boy, with no one to care for his parents, a life lacking both materially and spiritually, Charles now jumped into the upper class with his well-tailored suits, Italian leather shoes, and Indian silk ties. Charles was often accompanied by Mr. Felix to high-class parties. Mr. Felix never talked about Charles's past, but only said that he was the son of a French officer in Vietnam and that his family was forced to move to France because of the war. However, the luxurious and wealthy life, with the support and protection that Mr. Felix gave Charles, did not help him reform, correct his thoughts to cultivate and repay Felix's kindness. Charles could not overcome himself. With the label of being an officer's son, he thought that he had to have money. Even his morning cup of coffee had to be thanks to Mr. Felix. After a short time, Charles's cunning, thieving, and rogue nature returned. Charles quickly returned to his old ways, but this time he operated more cleverly and subtly. With the guidance and help of Mr. Felix, Charles, who was intelligent and flexible, came up with many tricks. Soon, Charles became rich thanks to successful criminal operations, including a series of forged documents throughout France and thefts from wealthy families he had the opportunity to know and visit. Charles's first operation took only a few minutes. He started the car and drove away immediately. After that, he contacted his old friends who were street thugs on the streets of Paris to help. Charles found a place to sell. He stole a total of 9 cars. At that time, just like that, Charles wandered around alone. On one side was the luxurious world that through Felix he had known. interacting with the elite individuals and the richest families in Paris. On the other side was the dark, vicious, and evil underworld of the City of Light, which was the world that Charles felt when, and only when he was there, he felt like he could be himself and live in his home, with friends of the same class as him. Gradually, Charles became a devil at heart. He brazenly took away too many things from people that, without him, they would not have lost. One day, at a lavish party with only nobles and wealthy people in Paris, a beautiful French girl named Chantal Copac was immediately attracted by Charles's wise and wealthy appearance, as he was rambling on about his imaginary adventures in the East, that he came from a wealthy family in Saigon, Vietnam, and spoke like a romantic poet. Just like that, he flirted with Chantal, making her intoxicated with sweet honey without knowing that waiting for her ahead would be countless hardships, bumps, and misfortunes. Their love grew gradually. Charles called Chantal, asking her to have dinner at the Imperial Hotel. Charles's plan at that time was that during the meal, he would propose to her with a gift. But Chantal refused the proposal, because when they learned about this relationship, her parents, who were traditional French tycoons, strongly opposed it, never allowing Chantal to date and marry someone like Charles. While Charles and Chantal were sitting at the dining table, a hotel receptionist recognized him as the one who had stolen a Cadillac and driven it out of the hotel yard earlier, and quickly reported it to the police. When he learned that he was rejected, Charles stole a DS car. He lost so much at the casinos that he had to use his reputation and borrowed money to get thousands of francs to satisfy his gambling cravings. But in the end, he was left empty-handed. On the way home, Charles frantically blamed Chantal and drove like a sick, insane person. Meanwhile, Chantal sat next to him, her face pale with fear. It was pouring rain outside. Just when he lost control, the police siren was wailing loudly, chasing right behind him. With his past and having just stolen a car, there were too many reasons for Charles to run away. He tried to step on the gas, not caring about safety, but then Charles lost control on a flooded road and had an accident. The scene made Chantal lose her voice, her throat hoarse. Her tears mixed with the rain as Charles's hands were handcuffed. In court, Charles testified that he was afraid of being late for his proposal to Chantal, and surprisingly, Chantal also confessed the same thing. For that reason, this time Charles's sentence was reduced. As for Chantal, seeing Charles arrested and remembering the memories they had together, she was tormented, and then she chose to stand by Charles. Not seeing the flashy boyfriend appear, colleagues and friends asked. Charles drew up a series of plots to convince Chantal's parents. In the end, they softened to Charles's money and arguments, allowing a simple wedding for their daughter. Not long after that, Chantal became pregnant. Then Charles was informed by a friend that the Covent garage, where Charles's stolen cars were sold, was under investigation by the police. He knew that sooner or later he would be caught, and that the police would eventually find out that he was the mastermind behind the forgeries all over France and the thefts from the wealthy families he had visited. So he had to run away quickly before being exposed. What awaits Chantal and her fiancé, who sold his soul to the devil ahead? What will happen to Charles's path to becoming the most evil, savage, brutal, and cold-blooded? When will his life of being carefree outside the law be revealed? Will Charles's small family be able to rest in peace on the path that leads to his sentences? Charles has gradually compromised with the devil to form a cold-blooded person without any remorse or sympathy. Not only that, it was Charles who tempered and gradually pushed Chantal into the path of sin, becoming his accomplice without her even knowing. Back to Charles's plan to escape from France. To do this, he first asked his friends to help him make a fake passport, then borrowed a car from Mr. Felix, then loaded his luggage and took his pregnant wife to escape. After leaving France, Charles Sobhraj used fake documents to travel through many Eastern European countries. Then, somehow, he convinced Chantal, the woman who was by his side, to commit a series of crimes on the run, just to have food and clothing. Posing as a young couple who owned hundreds of thousands of hectares of rubber in Indochina on vacation, or a textile businessman in Lebanon, Sobhraj and Chantal approached wealthy European tourists, offering them wine mixed with sleeping pills. When the victims were unconscious, their watches, rings, cameras, and even jewelry necklaces disappeared one by one. The total amount of assets the couple had earned was unknown, but according to Interpol, the figure must have been at least in the millions of dollars. By the time the family arrived in Istanbul, Turkey in Felix's car, French police had already begun to track down Sobhraj's escape plans. He had meandered through several countries and finally landed in India, his father's homeland, hoping to start a new life. Mumbai, the capital of Maharashtra state and India's most populous city, was Sobhraj's destination. It was the country's commercial and entertainment capital, attracting many tourists, important financial institutions, and especially immigrants from all over. Mumbai converges and blends many different communities and cultures, an ideal land for his tricks of fraud and theft. It did not take Sobhraj and Chantal long to integrate into the French expatriate society here. Right from their arrival, thanks to their cunning and skillful conversation, along with the money earned from their scams, Sobhraj rented a luxurious apartment in the British area of Malabar Hill. The couple quickly became acquainted with high-ranking French people in India. Meanwhile, Chantal, with the charm of a new mother, the knowledge and the noble demeanour of a Parisian lady, won the hearts of the ladies. Their first daughter was born in Mumbai, completing the perfect picture they built. The Sobhrajs quickly became familiar faces at tea parties and gatherings of the French upper class. In the early days, Sobhraj connected with groups of consumers of stolen goods in Mumbai, Calcutta, and New Delhi. Unlike Paris, gangs in the East operate on the principle of cash on delivery. Each transaction is completed and each goes their separate ways. This helps Sobhraj minimize the risk of being exposed, creating an ideal condition for him to expand his scope of operations. Sobhraj turned to brokering stolen cars, imported from Pakistan and Iran through Indian customs relations, to provide luxury cars to the wealthy, especially the French community living abroad. However, the favourable work did not last long when Sobhraj gradually fell into a gambling addiction, constantly losing money at Macau casinos, to the point of having to sell the jewellery he gave to Chantal to recoup. Chantal's loneliness and sadness increased as their family's life was always facing the threat of brutal creditors in the East, who were notoriously much more ferocious than those in the West. Jean Chrétien, Liam Vong drowned in debt, Charles Sobhraj was met a Frenchman. They shared their lives and became friends. This friend gave Sobhraj a daring plan. The crime scene was not in Bombay. Sobhraj decided to take on this mission. His prey was a golden jewellery counter on the ground floor of the Ashoka Hotel in New Delhi. According to the plan, taking advantage of the quiet night, Sobhraj broke into the guest room located right above the counter, intending to drill through the floor and then climb down to steal everything. But Sobhraj had no luck with his perfect plan. After 3 consecutive days without any progress, he had to change his plan from theft to robbery. Through surveillance, Sobhraj realised that this gold and jewellery counter had only one employee watching it during lunch break. When the opportunity was ripe, Sobhraj, alone, carrying a dagger, pretended to be a customer and entered, threatening the female employee with a cold, naked face. He restrained her, tied her up, but before he could take anything, the female employee quickly pressed the alarm button on the ground with her foot. The alarm blared loudly. Rushing straight to the airport, Sobhraj hoped to escape. At the same time, the female employee quickly reported the daring robbery to the police and provided identification. Upon receiving the information, the police force immediately sealed off the airport and set up many checkpoints on the roads in New Delhi to hunt him down. But Sobhraj had already boarded a plane back to Bombay. Returning to Bombay to support his family, Sobhraj continued his rampant theft and car trafficking. However, the net of heaven was wide open. Sobhraj was caught by the police while driving a stolen car. He did not expect that witnesses had recognized him as the robber of a jewelry store in New Delhi. Thrown into the most notorious and largest prison in New Delhi, Sobhraj began planning his first prison break. Initially, Sobhraj planned to pretend to have internal bleeding to be taken to the hospital, thereby taking the opportunity to escape. However, after examination, he was diagnosed with appendicitis, and had to undergo surgery. After the appendectomy, Sobhraj was placed on the list of convalescent prisoners with looser security. Seeing a golden opportunity, he sent a message to the outside, asking his wife Chantal to help him escape from the prison. Chantal used the cover of a nurse, sent Sobhraj sleeping pills. He secretly put sleeping pills in the guard's water bottle and waited for the opportunity to escape. Through Sobhraj's stepfather, a lieutenant in the French army in Indochina, he quickly got the plan to escape from India. The next destination of Sobhraj and Chantal was Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. Here, they continued to apply the familiar trick, offering wine mixed with sleeping pills to European tourists they had proactively met, then seizing their property. Under the guise of a wealthy couple, rubber plantation owners in Indochina, or silk merchants, the money they earned enabled them to live a life of luxury. Comfortably at a hotel in Kabul. However, just a few days after successfully carrying out a major heist, Sobhraj was suddenly recognized by one of his victims and reported to the police. Invited to the Kabul police station, he stubbornly denied the crime, claiming that there was a mistake. But deep down, he knew that the Afghan police would sooner or later verify with the Indian police through the entry stamp on his passport. This forced him to carefully calculate his escape plan from Kabul. He pretended to have a stomachache and asked his wife to bring him medicine. Learning from his failed escape in India, he was more cautious this time and succeeded in escaping smoothly. Escaping the Kabul police, Sobhraj immediately discussed with his wife to escape to Iran. However, this time, despite Sobhraj's pleading, persuasion, and all the tricks he used with his smooth tongue, Chantal was still determined not to follow him. She wanted to leave her criminal past behind so she could raise her child in peace. There was nothing left between Chantal and Sobhraj. Even when he offered her money for travel expenses, Chantal refused. Chantal then decided that her next trip would be a pilgrimage and perhaps her last escape. First, to cover the expenses, Chantal sold the necklace with a few small diamonds, a gift her mother had given her when she was a child. Then, she bought a plane ticket and bought some necessary items for her daughter Alta on the long trip. From then on, Sobhraj never saw his wife again. As for Sobhraj, he stole many passports with different names, replacing them with his own photo. He then used a fake name according to the passport and documents he was using to travel from country to country, wandering from Northern Europe to the Middle East. He continued to make a living by offering alcohol mixed with sleeping pills, but this time with a different scenario. Posing as a broker, buying and selling rubies, or an agent for a famous pharmaceutical corporation. What will Sobhraj's criminal journey be like? Will he stop at fraud and theft by drugging his victims? What characters will continue to appear in Sobhraj's miserable life? Will his half-brother Angelo be of any help to him, as his stepfather Orphose had suggested? His half-brother Angelo has become an accomplice to Sobhraj, participating in cross-border thefts from Northern Europe to the Middle East. But now, there are not many places where Sobhraj can go anymore, because he has committed crimes in too many places. To close this period of his life, he's determined to find a place where his stepfather told him he can find help. Istanbul, one of the largest cities, and also the economic, cultural and historical center of Turkey. In Istanbul, he met his half-brother, the biological son of Mrs. Pung and Mr. Alphose. Sobhraj has the advantage that he can easily blend into the crowd and pretend to be from any country, which is convenient for criminal activities. Thanks to this and his experience, Sobhraj showed Angelo everything that he could earn. Because of that, just a short time after meeting, being seduced by his brother, Angelo quickly listened to Sobhraj's words, became a right-hand man, outlined new plans specializing in stealing and smuggling cars and cigarettes, and then transferring them to Greece for consumption. The two carried out many cross-border operations. However, the stolen car transportation and consumption ring was discovered by the Greek police. Sobhraj and Angelo, along with several other accomplices, were arrested and detained in Athens, the capital of Greece. Immediately after being behind bars for the third time in his life, Sobhraj pretended to be sick and escaped on the way the prisoner transport vehicle moved from the hospital to prison. As for Angelo, the Greek police agreed to extradite him to Turkey for trial. While his half-brother languished in prison in Turkey, Sobhraj continued to wander, escaped from the police, and fled Greece with a fake passport. Sobhraj embarked on a long journey, with the end point being the place where his life would take a new turn, with increasing calculations and crimes. This was also the starting point for the battle of wits between him and the former Dutch diplomat, Herman Nijper. It was also here that Sobhraj's first death sentence was pronounced, none other than Thailand. Starting from Athens, Sobhraj returned to Turkey, then crossed Iran, Pakistan, and returned to India. But because he had many stains and was always on the watch list, every move of the Indian police during the journey across India to avoid detection, Sobhraj always bought first-class tickets. He knew that the elite police force and the passengers in this compartment were all upper class and probably could not go there. So this compartment was less noticed. To have money to spend, Sobhraj still used the old trick. Under the guise of a stone dealer captain, he always invited the passengers in the same compartment to drink wine mixed with sleeping pills. When those unfortunate companions were unconscious, he would take it all. The scenario was always that, by the time the waiter discovered the high-class guest sleeping soundly, Sobhraj was already on another train. Mariantella Club, he met his destiny. In his life, he happened to meet a Canadian medical secretary who was travelling to India with her ex-husband in the city of Srinagar. This is the summer capital of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, located in the Kashmir Valley. Here, posing as an experienced traveller, Charles Sobhraj told her about the places he had been to, such as Iran, India, Turkey, Greece. He told her about the customs and the lives of the people in those places. Attracted by Sobhraj's romantic and dissolute personality, the girl quickly fell in love with him, not knowing that, like his previous wife Chantal, waiting for her ahead was a road full of criminal days, gloom, darkness, and hiding. It was also here that Sobhraj asked for her address in her hometown and promised that if she wanted to meet, she should go to Thailand. That woman was Mary Angela from Quebec, Canada. Mary studied in Quebec, a province of Canada with its own language, culture, and political system. After graduating, Mary became a medical secretary at a clinic in Lévis City, eastern Quebec. Since her trip to India with her ex-husband and meeting Sobhraj in Srinagar, Mary has continuously received his love letters. Sobhraj did not forget to urge her to go to Bangkok to meet him. He even bought a plane ticket and sent letters to Mary. So Mary went to Bangkok, Thailand. After the flight from Quebec to Bangkok, Mary and Sobhraj met again at the floating market on the Chao Phraya River. It is not clear how Sobhraj talked, confided, and convinced Mary, who was a medical secretary, to agree to join his life. This meant that from now on, she would blindly reach out and become his right-hand man, inseparable from his shadow. As for Sobhraj, in his early days in Thailand, he found and rented a room at a small hotel on Charoen Krung Road, a major road in the capital Bangkok, running from the old city centre on Ratanakosin Island, passing through Bangkok's Chinatown and then continuing into Bang Rak district. This was famous for being a place with a large concentration of foreigners, especially Europeans, at that time. From here, Sobhraj began to find ways to do business, but this time he organised it differently than before. At that time, most of the cars in Bangkok were old models, and if they were sold, they would not be able to sell much. Moreover, he had not found a sales outlet because he did not know Thai, while most Thai people at that time did not speak English or French. Since Mary came to live with him, there had only been one successful deal. The couple met an Australian couple who were travelling in Bangkok. With his innate communication skills, Sobhraj was quickly considered a close friend by the couple. Afterwards, he and Mary gave them coconut water mixed with sleeping pills, then stole all their money, passports, wedding rings, and plane tickets. Thanks to that, Sobhraj began to consider recruiting more henchmen and forming a multinational criminal gang under the guise of a family. Sobhraj took the fake name Alan, and Mary took the fake name Monique. It was also from this incident that Sobhraj was nicknamed Asia's Charles Manson. Charles Manson was an American criminal and musician, the leader of the Manson family gang operating in the California desert, and the leader of a series of murders, including that of Sharon Tate, an American actress and model. The first person to catch Sobhraj's eye was a young Frenchman from Lot-et-Garonne named Dominique Renelot. It all started with a chance meeting at a cafe in northern Thailand. Under the guise of a gem dealer, Sobhraj chatted and then introduced Mary as his wife. The couple then invited Dominique to dinner. During the meal, Sobhraj secretly slipped some powdered leaves of the magia tree, a plant that grows in India, into Dominique's food plate, containing a substance that reacts with the digestive system, causing symptoms similar to dysentery. After eating, the Sobhraj couple broke up with Dominique. The next afternoon, Sobhraj came to Dominique's hotel room, pretending to visit, and saw Dominique rolling around, lying on the bed, holding her stomach and grimacing. He looked worried and generous and offered to invite Dominique to Bangkok for treatment. After arriving in Bangkok together, Dominique was shocked to realize that Sobhraj had taken all her passport and documents. But in return, he pretended to be kind, treated Dominique kindly, and gradually enticed Dominique into a life of crime, becoming his henchman. Gradually, Dominique was moved, and his greed gradually arose. Gradually, Dominic volunteered to do whatever Sobhraj asked. Even though this Kuteda boy, he knew that these were illegal activities. However, Dominic himself was limited by Sobhraj to fraud, smuggling and selling counterfeit goods. At the same time, Janet and Jackie, former policemen in Indochina, after their defeat, came to Bangkok. This time, he did not use poison, but treated them with food, partying, and used Mary as bait. Sobhraj stole their passports and money. When he returned, the next person Sobhraj recruited was an Indian teenager named Ajay Chowdhury. Sobhraj met Ajay when the boy was starving in the park. Given food, clothes, and shelter, Ajay obediently obeyed Sobhraj as if this servant was his master. But unlike Dominic, Janet and Jackie, Ajay was a cold type like Sobhraj and became his right-hand man, someone he could trust even in the most complicated situations. To assess Ajay's ability and test his loyalty, one day, Sobhraj gave him a fake gold Rolex watch with a pin removed from the strap, making it look like it was broken. Then, Ajay acted as if he was playing along, took the fake Rolex, and went straight to the beer bars along Maharaj Avenue, where American soldiers who had just returned from Saigon were always drinking with waitresses day and night. According to the script, Ajay would walk into the beer bar, show the watch, and say that he had just received it, then invite the American soldiers to buy it. At that moment, Sobhraj would appear, expressing his desire to buy it, but Ajay refused to sell. After a while of bargaining, Sobhraj would withdraw. As for the American soldiers, because it was Japanese goods, there was a fool who tried to bargain but failed. Many soldiers who were greedy for cheap goods immediately bought it, according to the prepared script. Once, Mary, Dominic, and Ajay took turns acting. For the first time, after gathering enough members willing to die for the criminal family, Sobhraj began to carry out a series of robberies, smuggling, and brutally taking the lives of others. The first victim, and also the origin of the name Bikini Killer of Charles Sobhraj, was an American girl who travelled here and there, who came to Thailand with the desire to learn about Buddhism. There are many sources of information that, before this case, Sobhraj had taken the lives of many other people. But this was the first case in which he revealed his traces, and also the first case of taking a life that he carried out. The husband and wife couple, Sobhraj and Mary, met an American girl named Teresa Knowlton from Seattle, Washington. Teresa, also known as Jenny Bolivar, was mentioned in the book Snake Man by author Thomas Thompson, about the life of Charles Sobhraj. Like other victims, Teresa was invited by Sobhraj and Mary to eat and cruise on the Chao Phraya River. Teresa's fun quickly ended. About 3 weeks after meeting Sobhraj, tidal waves washed Teresa's body ashore, lying on Pattaya Beach near the Gulf of Thailand. Initially, Thai police believed that the cause of Teresa's death was due to falling into the sea and drowning, combined with drinking too much beer and smoking, which is common among some young American men and women when traveling to Thailand. However, at the request of the victim's family through the US Embassy, a team of forensic experts from the US flew to Bangkok to participate in the autopsy. The results showed that the back of the girl's neck still had faint bruises from her fingers. Thus, Teresa was drowned and then thrown into the sea. Until now, no one really knows why Teresa died. The hypothesis that the crime was committed to rob her property seems unreasonable, because according to the testimony of Teresa's friends, she was a backpacker, did not have much money and almost no property. There is also a hypothesis that Sobhraj and his henchmen got to know the girl with the purpose of recruiting her into the gang. But when Teresa refused, he was afraid that she would report him and everything would fall apart, so he killed her to cover up the clues. In fact, Sobhraj himself once said that Teresa had come to his apartment in Bangkok and that it was Ajay who picked her up and took her there. Later, a young Israeli man named Vitaly Hakim also fell into the trap of Sobhraj's gang. Like Teresa, Vitaly came to Thailand to find meaning in life and explore Buddhism, but unfortunately, he became a victim of this notorious criminal organization, Bangkok. After meeting and getting to know Sobhraj's group, Vitaly moved in with the gang. After staying together for a few days, Vitaly, along with Ajay, Dominic and Sobhraj and Marie, went on a trip to the tourist area of Pattaya on the Gulf of Thailand, which is a place that attracts foreign tourists like ants. When the group finished their trip and left Pattaya, Dominic and Ajay did not see Vitaly with them, so they asked and Sobhraj answered that he had decided to stay with a few new friends. This explanation surprised both Dominic and Ajay, because Vitaly's clothes and belongings were still in the apartment. Not only that, Vitaly's passport, money and checks were given to Sobhraj to hold. Not long after the day Sobhraj's group returned to Bangkok, Vitaly Hakim was found on a deserted beach in the resort of Pattaya, burned to a crisp and showing signs of being beaten. The autopsy results showed that Vitaly was still alive at the time he was doused in gasoline and burned. When the Thai police investigated and checked the hotel where Vitaly had rented a room, they found that Vitaly's clothes and personal belongings were still intact. Only his passport and money were missing. The staff at the restaurant where Vitaly had rented a room said that Vitaly had a habit of paying for meals by giving US dollars in cash. Many witnesses also said that before Vitaly was found dead, they saw him hanging out with a group of people when conducting a deeper investigation. The Thai police found out that the group was Dominic and Sobhraj and his wife. When taking statements, they said that they had only known Vitaly at the Pattaya resort and had only met briefly before parting ways. The Thai police investigation concluded that Vitaly may have caused some kind of conflict with one of the Thai gangs in Pattaya, which led to his assault and murder. However, Vitaly's mysterious death was not linked to the case of Teresa Knowlton, another case that still has many unsolved questions. Sobhraj's explanation for Vitaly's absence and failure to return with the group after the Pattaya trip made other members of his gang begin to suspect. Who would stand up to him? Will Vitaly leave any clues? Or will he also sink into the darkness like Teresa? How long will this mysterious series of murders last? And when will Sobhraj's true identity be revealed? Unfortunately for Sobhraj, he did not know that Vitaly had left clues to track him down, putting him in a difficult position in Thailand. Since meeting Sobhraj and his gang, Vitaly Hakim has called Israel and his girlfriend, Shameni Karo, many times, saying that he had met good friends and often went out, then went to their house to party and live together. Before going to the Pattaya resort, Vitaly called Shameni and said that he would go to Pattaya with Sobhraj and his wife and their housemates. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact Vitaly, Shameni Karo, who had not yet heard that Vitaly had passed away, immediately bought a plane ticket from Tel Aviv, Israel, located on the Mediterranean coast, to Bangkok, Thailand, to find her lover. In another development, around the time Shameni booked her ticket and boarded the plane from Tel Aviv to Bangkok to inquire about her boyfriend Vitaly Hakim, Sobhraj also had an appointment with a Dutch couple about to get married. The husband was Henk Bintanja and his fiancée was Cornelia Hemke. During a trip to Hong Kong to order fake watches, Sobhraj met and got to know the couple while they were travelling around Southeast Asia under the fake name of Alain Gauthier, a gem dealer. Through some inquiring, Sobhraj easily got to know the couple's story, knowing that Henk was of mixed descent, which caused him to be discriminated against in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, Cornelia, although working in the medical field, loved her husband very much and was also influenced by his mentality. Therefore, the two of them decided to take a trip around Southeast Asia, spending every last penny before returning. In the Netherlands, they were only middle class and rarely had access to the luxuries of the rich. Sobhraj realized that Henk and Cornelia were the next big prey. Using the guise of being a hypocrite, he gradually gained their trust, taking them to luxurious places, dining and shopping, under the guise of a wealthy gem merchant. High-class gem jewelry, and then naturally they fell into the trap. When the opportunity was ripe, Sobhraj divided up a sapphire ring. By the way, he did not forget to invite the couple that when they came to Bangkok for a vacation, they should remember to visit his luxurious villa to celebrate their 100 years of happiness. When the work of making fake watches in Hong Kong was completed, he left a message to Henk and Cornelia that he had urgent business and had to return to Bangkok first, and gave them his address and promised to send a car and driver to pick him up at the airport in Thailand. When Henk and Cornelia arrived in Bangkok, they went to Sobhraj's residence at the address he sent them. But there was one thing that Sobhraj did not expect, which was that Henk and Cornelia were very diligent in writing letters home. During their stay in Singapore, their association with a gem dealer named Alain and their plan to visit this businessman's villa were all recorded and fully recounted in their letters to the Netherlands. During meals together, Sobhraj secretly poisoned their food, and they fell ill in a mysterious way. Then came Sobhraj's generous care. It's unclear how he actually calculated it, but the way he approached Henk and Cornelia was similar to the way he approached Dominic, kind, generous, then enticed them into crime. Will this soon-to-be wed couple end up like Vitaly Hakim? While Henk and Cornelia lay sick at Sobhraj's house, Shameni arrived in Thailand. It didn't take her long to find out where Sobhraj's gang was, because this was also the place where Vitaly had stayed and given her the address before. This put Sobhraj in a very difficult position, facing the risk that everything could fall apart and be exposed. But it didn't take Sobhraj long to make a decision for himself. To solve the problem, on the one hand, he appeared to be kind and offered Shameni that he wanted to go with her to Mori Yacht in Pattaya, the very place where Vitaly had rented a room, to find out what had happened. Shameni listened to him, agreed, and temporarily kept a little faith. That very night, during the meal, when Cornelia and Henk waited until they were unconscious, Sobhraj and Ajay brutally murdered the couple to cover up the evidence. Returning home, both Sobhraj and Ajay reeked of gasoline and dirt. The other gang members questioned them, but only received silence from Sobhraj. Later, the bodies of Cornelia and Henk were found charred to a crisp. One of them had a broken cervical vertebra. When the information flooded the pages of newspapers in Bangkok, along with the passports, the names were of other people, but the pictures were of Sobhraj and Marie. Dominic pieced together all the strange events that happened around Sobhraj and came to the conclusion that Sobhraj was not only the counterfeit watch dealer and smuggler that he had known, but also the one who caused a series of extremely serious cases with extremely brutal and inhumane methods. As for Shameni, she and Sobhraj set out for Pattaya, but waiting for her were no answers or clues to find Vitaly's whereabouts. 9 days after the trip to Pattaya with Sobhraj, Shameni was found in the same condition as Teresa Knowlton. She was floating on the surface of Pattaya beach, also wearing only a swimsuit. And once again, the Thai police concluded that Shameni died of drowning. This was also the time when the phrase "the bikini killer" first appeared on the front pages of newspapers published in Bangkok. Nepal. After committing the crime against Henk and Cornelia, taking their passports, personal documents, and all their money, with the passports in hand, Sobhraj and Marie changed their photos, then went to Nepal to let things calm down, along with finding new prey. In the capital city of Kathmandu, Nepal, they met a Canadian guy named Laurent Carrière and an American girl named Connie Bronzik. After getting to know them and gaining their trust, Sobhraj invited them that he would take care of all the expenses. Suddenly, in a foreign land, they met a kind, funny, generous and wealthy couple. Laurent and Connie did not suspect anything, quickly agreed to join the trip. On the way to Everest, as previously discussed, Sobhraj and Marie suddenly changed direction, taking Laurent and Connie to a deserted place with the excuse of meeting the local Nepalese guides. Here, Sobhraj suddenly used a stick to hit Laurent's neck and head many times, while Marie also used a knife to target Connie and brutally attacked. After finishing, Sobhraj and Marie erased the traces in the same way he had done before, with Vitaly Hakim and Henk. Clelia Sobhraj took out a drinking bottle from his pocket, but inside it was filled with gasoline, then poured it on the victims. However, the amount of gasoline he brought this time was only enough to burn Laurent. As for Connie, they had to leave her behind, without a trace. Not long after Sobhraj and Marie attacked Laurent and Connie in a remote area on the way to Everest, locals were shocked to discover a Western man in a deserted field, dead, charred and stabbed many times. Upon receiving the news, Nepalese police quickly took action. However, the scene and the victim did not give them many clues, especially the identity of this unfortunate man was still a big question mark. Many professional measures were applied, but still did not achieve any positive results. At the same time, the Nepalese police force expanded the scope of the scene, searching for more evidence, and this time, in misfortune, there was luck. Nepalese police were again surprised to continue to discover another deceased woman with many traces of violence on her body, especially on her chest with many stab wounds. Fortunately, they quickly identified the victim's identity, as well as the time when the victim died. It was none other than Connie Bronzik. From the name of that unfortunate woman, the investigation agency of the Nepalese police discovered the identity of Connie's new boyfriend. Following Connie's trail, the investigation agency thought it had lifted the veil of secrecy related to Laurent, when the Nepalese customs had documents proving that Laurent Carrière had left Nepal at the time after Connie's death. From there, the Nepalese police concluded that it was very likely that this man named Laurent Carrière, after committing the crime against his new girlfriend, quickly left Nepal in an attempt to escape. Returning to Sobhraj, after committing the crime in Nepal, he replaced the photo on Laurent's passport and returned to Bangkok smoothly. But what awaited him ahead would no longer be days of brazenly committing crimes in such an arrogant manner. During this same period, in Bangkok, Dominique, Yannick and Jackie found a series of passports of people they had met at Sobhraj's house. They were extremely afraid of the heavy sentence hanging over their heads as Sobhraj's accomplices, so they wrote a letter in which they detailed everything they had witnessed and the suspicious cases that Sobhraj was involved in, sent it to the Thai police and quickly fled the land of the Golden Temple, running straight to Paris. Back in their hideout in Bangkok, when they heard that their accomplices had suddenly disappeared, Sobhraj had to be highly vigilant and constantly looked at the situation in all directions. At this time, the Nepalese side began to find out that Connie and Laurent had a relationship with Sobhraj, Marie and Ajay. At the same time, they listed all three as prime suspects in the case and issued a nationwide arrest warrant. At the same time, Thailand also made certain moves to track down Sobhraj after Dominique's letter. Faced with this situation, Sobhraj quickly came up with a new plan. He, Marie and Ajay immediately crossed the border to India, then to Kolkata, the capital of West Bengal, India, to take refuge. In Kolkata, what Sobhraj needed most at the moment was money. a lot of money to accumulate more and a clean passport. They were constantly looking for more prey. The actual number of victims was also unknown, but among them was an Israeli scholar, Mr. Avni Dakup, who unfortunately caught Sobhraj's eye. Still using the tricks of getting acquainted, inviting people to eat, drink, play, then gradually gaining their trust, and finally ending the lives of their prey. Scholar Avni Dakup was no exception. He was suffocated in his hotel room in Kolkata. That is, with a clean passport in hand, Sobhraj took Ajay and Marie to Singapore, then considered returning to Thailand once more. Fate temporarily put aside Sobhraj's journey. We will move to another timeline, which will intersect with Sobhraj's criminal journey at a time when the villain least expected it. Thailand at that time had not yet developed into the urban area of towering skyscrapers like today. The subway and SkyTrain had not yet been built. The traffic was so crowded that it could take people hours to move around the crowded hot city. And it was not like the digital age when information could be transmitted almost instantly. Back then, the world was slower, less connected. That is why, when a foreign tourist went missing, it could take weeks, even months, for people to discover it. Charles Sobhraj was thought to have come under suspicion when a junior Dutch diplomat in Bangkok, Thailand, along with his wife Angela Kemban, first went missing, but then had their information changed. It was only after the information was confirmed that things were not quite as they seemed. A letter arrived about the family's letter-writing habits. The family had heard nothing from the couple, and almost immediately sensed something was amiss. Herman wondered if they were the Dutch couple mentioned in the letter. Another strange piece of information continued to come to Herman Nippenberg. Paul Simmons, an administrative attaché at the Belgian embassy and a friend of Herman's, told of a French gem dealer named Alan Gorter, who had been found hoarding a large number of passports in his Bangkok apartment. These passports belonged to the victims who were believed to have died, including the Dutch couple Han and Konia, who are currently missing. Herman tried to ask for more information, but was only told by Simon that he would not reveal his source. After much thought, Herman decided to launch a small investigation. He asked a Dutch dentist in Bangkok to examine the victims of the fire at the Thai capital's police mortuary and used the missing couple's dental records for comparison. The strong smell of disinfectant mixed with the stench of decay still remains. The scene, along with everything else that followed, was so vivid in Herman's mind that it left a deep impression on him. The dentist Herman had contacted had examined the mouth of a dead man and said loudly, "That's them." The scene, along with everything else that followed, had shocked Herman's mind, triggering a personal struggle that he would never forget. On that day, Dominic, along with Janik and Jackie, had managed to escape the clutches of Sobhraj, now known as Alain. But did he really know Sobhraj? What would Sobhraj's return to Thailand be like now that Dominic's accusations had reached the Thai police? Dutch diplomat Herman Knippenberg had begun to take notice of him. How would the quest for justice for the unfortunate victims continue? And what would be the end of Charles Sobhraj? Catch Part 5 on Street Detective TV. The passport data was collected from an Israeli scholar. At this time, the Thai police began to suspect an anonymous man and a Western woman returning to Thailand. Sobhraj knew that the local government would not easily arrest him, even if Dominic exposed his crimes. With his experience in the field, Sobhraj knew that everything could be bought with money. With dirty money, he evaded the Thai police force. Finally, Sobhraj was able to extract some information with a list of crimes and evidence from Dominic. However, the Thai police were facing an extremely dangerous and aggressive criminal, with many faces and tricks specializing in using fake passports, making arrests difficult. More importantly, Sobhraj's real identity was still very vague to the authorities. The investigation by the Thai police was completely within Sobhraj's calculations. If the case had been made public, it would have been possible for him to escape. In fact, the investigation was kept secret to avoid negatively affecting the tourism industry. Based on Dominic's confession, The police quietly investigated without making any announcements. Dutch diplomat Herman Knippenberg called Simon to ask for information about the gem dealer Alan. After much convincing from Herman, Simon revealed a name: Nadine Giest, a French woman who lived in the same Bangkok apartment building as Sobhraj. It is unclear how Simon knew Nadine, but that was enough for Herman to schedule a meeting with the woman. During the conversation, Herman received a lot of extremely valuable information from Nadine Gyrus, including confirmation that she'd seen the Dutch couple, Hag and Konia, going to Charles Sobhraj's apartment and the people living there. With this information, Herman reported it to the Thai authorities while continuing his own investigation of a man whose identity is still so obscure. Simon did not hesitate to put in a lot of effort, he found out, and followed information from Western tourists to taxi and tuk-tuk drivers scattered around Bangkok. However, bad news was reported to Herman. Sobhraj and his accomplices planned to go to Europe for a while. That night, after a whole day of working with the Thai police, Herman got his first blow when Sobhraj was arrested alive in his apartment. But nothing more, because Sobhraj had prepared the scenario in advance. Sitting in the interrogation room, with countless questions surrounding the particularly serious cases suspected to be related to him, Sobhraj just calmly showed a fake passport with his photo and declared that he was an American citizen. As if nothing, Sobhraj was quickly released. In addition, part of the reason Sobhraj was freed this time was due to the Thai authorities' concerns about negative public opinion. If a trial for the murder of a foreign tourist were opened, their tourism industry would suffer a great loss. There are unconfirmed sources that as soon as she was released, Nadine Gyrus called Herman in a panic, saying inaudibly that one of Sobhraj's housemates had invited her to the apartment to talk, and now she needed to make a decision. On the other end of the line, Herman was struggling fiercely with himself. If Nadine went, her life would be in danger, but if she didn't go, she would be blacklisted by Sobhraj, under suspicion that she was an informant. In a moment, Herman picked up the phone and simply said, "I'm really sorry, you have to go." Nadine's fateful trip, which seemed so intimate, turned out to be fraught with danger. Herman was on edge, ready to grab the phone. Luckily, not only was Nadine invited, but Sobhraj's team didn't have much time to investigate further. They only had time to probe a little to find out who was poking their nose into their business. During that meeting, Nadine quickly stuffed some passport photos she had seen at Sobhraj's apartment into her pocket and provided them to Herman and the authorities. These were also important documents, providing more information about the victim's dot. At this time, the Dutch authorities were often sighing under pressure. Herman received a notice of leave 3 weeks before leaving for his vacation. During the investigation, Herman and his then-wife Angela determined that the unfortunate victims all had a common characteristic. Before their deaths, they had met, eaten, and hung out with the Sobhraj couple and their accomplices. From there, Herman and his wife compiled documents related to the case, sending them to embassies around Bangkok in the hope of collecting more information. Herman's efforts were rewarded. Upon returning from vacation, he received a call from the Canadian embassy, informing him of the identity of a woman named Munich, a close associate of Sobhraj. Her real name was Mary. Canadian police visited Mary's family and workplace in her home country, but Mary's parents naively replied that their beloved daughter was traveling with her boyfriend and provided an emergency contact with an address near Mexico. From this clue, the fog about Charles Sobhraj's identity gradually cleared. The address Mary left for her parents in her hometown was the address of Sobhraj's mother, Tran Lon Pong. Almost immediately, all the information that the French police had about the character named Charles Sobhraj and his contacts while in France was put together. Herman was now in Thailand, and at least the Dutch and Thai authorities knew that they were dealing with a dangerous criminal. Herman quickly scored his first victory when he identified the identity of the gem dealer Alan. However, not long after, Herman received another call from Nadine Gyrus. She said the landlord of the apartment Sobhraj rented was planning to kick him out, planning to throw away all the furniture and rent it out again. In a flash, Herman had After convincing and obtaining an emergency search warrant for Sobhraj's residence, Thai police were shocked to discover and seize a lot of evidence showing that Sobhraj was involved in extremely serious cases that occurred in the area. This evidence included the passports of some of the victims, along with related documents such as plane tickets, letters, photos, macchiat leaf powder, and 3 industrial-sized containers of liquid. This liquid was identified as a laxative with much stronger medicinal properties. In addition, there were also Malaysian jackets and handbags. At the time Thai police searched the apartment where Sobhraj rented, he and Marie were in Singapore. When returning to Bangkok, just getting out of the taxi to walk back to the apartment, Sobhraj unexpectedly met a neighbour child, whom he had warned him about before. The child informed him, "A few days ago, many policemen came to your house." Immediately, Sobhraj and his accomplices turned around and fled, rented a car, and drove straight to Surat Thani province, southern Thailand, where they stayed for a night. The next day, Sobhraj, Mary, and his accomplices crossed the river to cross the border into Malaysia. In Kuala Lumpur, they repeatedly broke into gem shops, committed a series of thefts, and traded gems on the black market. After that, the group went to Geneva, Switzerland, posing as gem traders to find outlets for the goods they had earned in Malaysia, and at the same time purchase more in Switzerland to bring back to sell in Malaysia for profit. On a trip from Switzerland to Malaysia, only Sobhraj and Astra left, while Mary stayed in Geneva. When she returned, Mary saw that Sobhraj was alone. She wanted to ask, but Sobhraj's eyes seemed to say never to ask anything about Astra again. Mary seemed to understand that Astra, who had been Sobhraj's right-hand man, was no longer of any use and might be somewhere in the Malaysian jungles. Some sources indicate that Astra was last seen in Germany. To this day, the search for information about Astra's whereabouts continues. Under pressure from the Netherlands, when there was little progress from Thailand, Herman Nippenberg received instructions from the Dutch ambassador to share the story with the press. Within a few days, the Bangkok Post published the shocking story on its front page, drawing public opinion and a series of other newspapers into the fray. News of a serial killer of foreign tourists in Thailand exploded, and by this time, there had been victims of various nationalities from the United States, Canada, Turkey, the Netherlands, France, and Israel. Embassies were constantly pressing Thailand to bring justice, with pressure from many sides, and the risk of a major impact on the multi-million-dollar tourism industry. Thai authorities were forced to take serious action, organising large-scale campaigns to capture Charles Sobhraj. With the image of a villain like Sobhraj, the International Criminal Police Organisation, Interpol, also got involved. After connecting many cases in different countries, the Interpol notice was quickly issued. By this time, Sobhraj and Mary had consumed most of the gems they had earned in Malaysia and were on their way to Bombay, India, to plan a IA new, with improved schemes and tricks. In Bombay, Sobhraj recruited a young Frenchman named Jean Lacombe. Initially, they planned to mix alcohol with sleeping pills to knock Jean out and steal his property and documents. However, due to an overdose, Jean died. Next, Sobhraj tricked a group of French graduate students by introducing himself as a professional tour guide. After many attempts to win their trust, the students trusted him and asked Sobhraj to take them to many places. During a meal at the Vikram Hotel, under the pretext of disease prevention, he gave each of them a poisoned pill, saying it was a medicine to prevent dysentery. However, this mission did not go as smoothly as he thought. The drug took effect faster than expected, and 3 of the group only pretended to take the medicine. They rushed to control Sobhraj and brought him to the police station. The investigation brought to light the plot of him and his accomplices, including Mary, Barbara, and Marie Ellen. Then, Sobhraj continued to be prosecuted with a series of evidence from many countries. His sentence seemed to have no end, as the governments of India, Nepal, Greece, and Afghanistan all wanted to prosecute him for various crimes. Finally, Sobhraj was sent to the famous Tihar prison in New Delhi, where, with his cunning nature, he continued to collude and bribe some officials to live like a king in prison. As for Barbara and Marie Ellen, they could not bear the harsh life in prison and were determined to end their lives. However, They were discovered in time by the prison guards and taken to the emergency room. Meanwhile, the Indian government conducted trials and detained him for a long time. Indian prosecutors fought fiercely to impose a death sentence on Sobhraj, but he remained indifferent to the law, continuing to take advantage of all relationships and hidden rules in prison. In the end, Charles Sobhraj's sentence was not over yet. The world was shocked to learn that he would continue to be held responsible for a series of crimes he committed, from murder to robbery. Under pressure from international public opinion, Thai authorities, along with the coordination of embassies and Interpol, planned to extradite him to Thailand for trial. Charles Sobhraj was extradited to Thailand to continue serving a sentence that could be up to the death penalty by the Thai court. At that time, everyone thought that this would be the end of this evil man's life. But returning to Sobhraj, after hearing the Indian court's verdict and starting to serve his sentence, it was also the time when he planned the next part of his life. He knew that escaping from Tihar prison would not be difficult, but the important thing for Sobhraj now was to answer the question, how will you continue to live after escaping from prison? An international arrest warrant was placed on his head, but he believed that over time, public opinion and national governments would gradually forget. At that time, Sobhraj could leisurely walk out with freedom in his hands. Thus, he bet on time, accepting to stay in Tihar to wait for the opportunity. Empire in Tihar prison. During his time in Tihar, Sobhraj not only served his sentence, but also built his own empire. With his cunning nature, he created a life like a king in prison. Sobhraj's years here were recreated in the non-fiction novel Black World, Confessions of a Tihar Prison Warden, co-authored by journalist Julia Chatradori and Suling Gupta, former director of Tihar Prison. Sobhraj used the money from selling gems to bribe the entire prison. He not only bribed, but also held documents about high-ranking officials, creating his own kingdom. Sobhraj was free to move around the prison without any restrictions and had a row of 3 cells with full amenities from TV, refrigerator, air conditioner, telephone to hot tub. His meals were full of delicacies and he sometimes organised lavish parties. In addition, he was given special permission to let female lawyer Sena Sanel into his cell to sleep with him, keep him company and chat with him day and night, making money from fame. Meanwhile, in Thailand, news about Sobhraj's cases continuously appeared in the media, creating a huge wave of public opinion that spread to Western countries. This attracted many journalists and filmmakers to India, trying to get into Tihar prison to interview Sobhraj. With his cunning nature, he did not miss the opportunity to make money from interviews. One of the famous interviews was with Richard Neville from Over magazine and his future wife. After receiving a handsome fee, Sobhraj recounted his life, and his life of crime became the inspiration for many works, such as the book The Snake, written by Richard Neville and his wife. Sobhraj also sold the copyright of his life of crime to Garden House to make a film about his life with a Bollywood production company, Rebirth and Escape from the Death Penalty. Despite his luxurious life in prison, Sobhraj was still afraid of the risk of being extradited to Thailand, where the death penalty might await him. To avoid this, his lawyer and his lover, Sena Angel, devised a plan so that he could avoid the death penalty. Sena explained that Thai law stipulates that once the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution has expired, a trial cannot be held. Therefore, Sobhraj needed to commit a crime big enough in India to extend his prison term, enough to overcome the statute of limitations in Thailand. When he heard this, Sobhraj felt a flag opened in his stomach. Charles Sobhraj planned to escape from Tihar prison. He made up an excuse that it was his birthday and threw a grand, lavish party for all the guards and inmates. With his usual trick, Sobhraj mixed sleeping pills into all the food and drinks. When everyone was struggling under the effects of the drugs, he simply unlocked each door and walked out. When he heard the news that Sobhraj had escaped, Sunu Gupta, the director of Tihar prison, rushed straight from his house to the prison. After calming down, Sunu analysed and realised that Sobhraj's time in Tihar was running out. it was very likely that his escape was to avoid being extradited to Thailand. Developments in the US, meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away in the US. Herman Knippenberg was studying for a master's degree in public administration at Harvard University when he suddenly received a call from his female program advisor. Warning, I think you should leave for now. Sobhraj has escaped from Tihar prison and your life may be in danger. However, Herman knew Sobhraj better than anyone and was confident that he was too smart to chase him and would quickly hide the chase. In India, Herman quickly realized Sobhraj's true purpose. Later, the authorities arrested him while he was sipping beer at a restaurant in the coastal resort of Goa. To the bewilderment of the police around him, Sobhraj simply accepted his arrest with surprising calm. Despite his escape and recapture, Sobhraj was kept under surveillance while waiting to see if any country in India would extradite him. However, no country was willing to take him, and India eventually deported Sobhraj back to France. Sobhraj's reappearance in France created a huge media frenzy. In France, Sobhraj earned a lot of money from reporters who wanted to interview him, and he declared, "No money, no meeting." Back in Nepal in Paris, he lived comfortably in the suburbs, occasionally hanging around bars to talk about his life of crime as long as he was paid. Sobhraj gradually became a famous phenomenon, with the press willing to pay a lot to take his picture. However, surprisingly, while living comfortably in France, Sobhraj suddenly returned to Nepal, the only place in the world where his arrest warrant was still in effect. Thai newspapers reported that this was the law of karma for Sobhraj. According to some sources, he returned to Kathmandu, Nepal to set up a mineral water business because Sobhraj was too eager to be famous and too confident in his cunning. After seeing Sobhraj on the streets of the capital Kathmandu, a reporter quickly wrote an article with pictures. Immediately after the article was published, the Nepalese police took notice and investigated him for using a fake passport. Facing justice in Nepal, when facing Nepalese investigators in the interrogation room, Sobhraj still firmly denied having ever been to Nepal. However, justice did not stop before him. At this time, Herman Knippenberg, who was once Sobhraj's opponent, received news that he had been arrested in Nepal. Although he was retired, Herman did not hesitate and quickly went downstairs to get his car, preparing to return to the fight with Sobhraj. The end Sobhraj's testimony in Nepal was received and recorded in detail by Herman, exposing all of his justifications. In the end, Sobhraj had nowhere to hide, and he had to face justice for his crimes. Herman quickly contacted and sent documents to the FBI. At the same time, he made tireless efforts to support the Nepalese police force and Interpol in capturing and convicting Charles Sobhraj. The preliminary trial of Sobhraj in Nepal officially opened, and all of his assets in Nepal were confiscated. At the end of the preliminary trial, Sobhraj was sentenced to life in prison. However, due to the lack of evidence and witnesses to convict him completely, Sobhraj immediately appealed. During this time, Sobhraj's lawyer also announced that his wife, Chantal Compagnon, who is currently in France, filed a lawsuit with the European Court of Human Rights against the French government for refusing to provide any assistance to him. However, before there was any response from the French side, Sobhraj attempted to escape from prison again. He planned to use poison to knock down the barricades and escape. Sobhraj used his laptop, cordless phone, and mobile phone to send an email asking a friend outside to buy him a chemical compound that could cause loss of human consciousness. However, Sobhraj's plot was quickly discovered and completely suppressed. Trial. The court sentenced Charles Sobhraj to life in prison. He will spend the rest of his life in a Nepalese prison. Despite his life sentence, Sobhraj remained famous. A series of film companies, publishers, and press agencies sought to write about his life of crime. From a dangerous criminal, devoid of all humanity, Sobhraj became a famous figure in society, living a prosperous life even in a Nepalese prison. He appealed against the verdict of the Kathmandu District Court, calling the sentence unjust and accusing the judges of racism. his lawyer sent a petition to the then French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, asking the French government to intervene and request the Nepalese government to release Sobhraj on humanitarian grounds. However, this petition was quickly rejected. Continuing to shock the media, Sobhraj suddenly announced his engagement to a French woman of Nepalese origin, Nihita Biswas. Nihita, who works as a prison interpreter and is the daughter of lawyer Sakuntala Thapa, told the media that she knew about Sobhraj's identity but still loved him. She said that Sobhraj's eyes, gaze and French charm stole her heart. Sobhraj issued a press release through Nihita, claiming that he had never been convicted of murder by any court and asking the press and media not to call him a serial killer. However, the Supreme Court of Nepal upheld the life sentence handed down by the district court for illegally entering Nepal. The court also ordered the freezing of all of Sobhraj's assets in Nepal. After the trial, Nihita and Sakuntala, who is also Sobhraj's lawyer, were summoned for contempt of court. The case was reopened due to concerns that Sobhraj might appeal his life sentence and seek early release due to his old age. To ensure that he remained in custody, prosecutors increased surveillance. His health was increasingly critical, but despite numerous interviews, Sobhraj always denied everything in court and never gave a convincing reason for his brutal murders. To this day, Charles Sobhraj's true motive for killing his victims remains a big unanswered question. Herman Knippenberg's obsession. For Herman Knippenberg, the case has consumed half his life, becoming an obsession since the fateful letter reached him and drew him into a vortex of fighting for justice. He once said, "This will not be over for me until he is in a better world, or I am in a better world." For Herman, Sobhraj was like a chronic malaria, coming and going, taking over his mind. Eventually, Herman went his own way, remarried a woman named Vanessa, and now lives peacefully in his own home. Warrington, New Zealand, and still keeps a large archive of related documents. Sincerely thank the audience for watching. Please press the bell and subscribe to update the latest videos. Like and share to share with more people. Comment your thoughts, comments, or suggest contributions so we can improve. Reference and summary source, Street Detective TV. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to explore shocking true crime stories, unsolved mysteries, and secrets yet to be uncovered. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing exciting, high-quality content. Thank you for joining us on this journey.